much. Thank you. Morning, everybody. Hang on, this is the interactive part. Morning, everybody. Thank you, that's much better. So I'll, as my panel wandering up to the stage, if you'd be so kind, they've asked me just as we tee this thing up, just to give my view on what's happening in the world in this space. So the first thing to tell you is, my name is Bruce Morton, I am a freelancer. So I'm glad to be here today. Thank you. After 45 years of corporate, as of the end of last year, I retired as head of strategy for Legis Global Solutions. An interesting comment that was made about the payment systems. I have to say this because half a dozen clients I signed up with in the last month, when I got to Worksome, the experience was phenomenal compared to everybody else. I didn't have to print pages off, sign them, scan them, photocopy, fax, none of that. It was great. So anyway, those organizations that I've seen that are further on this journey and are getting more value from the total extended workforce, independent contractors, freelancers, to simplify it, is the organizations that are starting with the work, not the talent. So it might sound obvious, it might sound like a subtle mind shift, but it's massive. Because most companies, they've grown up in a way, and I think the industry that I've been in, the recruitment staffing industry, probably to blame for this. The first conversation we have with a hiring manager is, do you want to hire them or do you want a contractor? Or do you want a service provider to do that work? And we force them into that silo straight out of the gate, as opposed to giving them options and advising them on there are different ways of getting this work done. Let's have that conversation and agree on it might be a mixed bag. What can be automated? What should we be using a contractor for? What naturally lends itself to a freelancer? Whereabouts in the world should we put it? How much should it cost? How long should it take? And then giving those options, then you can really dig in to the strategy around how can we take advantage of this massive, massive tsunami of people now who want to work this way, as we just saw from the last presentation. So the key to that part, before we get into introducing the panel here, is this is that moment, if you take one thing away, I want you to remember one word, and that's deconstruction. If you start with the work, the big scope of work, that big project that's going to be done, deconstruct that into tasks, and then task by task by task, what is the best way to get that particular task done? Your lives will be much easier doing it that way. And we've now entered a world where actually hiring somebody is the last option on that journey. When I was, 45 years ago, when I was a lad, it was the opposite. Yeah, you naturally would just hire somebody. And if the secretary phoned in sick, you'd have to get one of those damn temps, right? But the world has shifted so much now that we're moving into an automation first, employee last world, hence the $1.8 trillion you saw earlier. So, without more ado, let's get stuck in here. If you quickly go around the line, introduce yourselves, and then we'll get some questions.
Thank you, Bruce. But before I introduce myself, so Bruce and I worked together in his previous life before he turned freelancer. You've got your own logo. There's a Bruce Morton logo. That's news. Congratulations.
Freelancer made it for me.
Well, there we go. You're living the dream. Hi, so my name's Simon Bradbury. My job title is I'm VP for International Markets for a company called Legis Global Solutions, where Bruce used to work. And I basically run our business, which is mostly a kind of temp contractor management business for big corporates. And I run it across Europe and Asia Pacific.
Good morning, everyone. My name's David Gettings. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Impellium Group. Previous to that, I was a Managing Director for Lorien Resourcing, largest tech staffing business in the UK. I'm ultimately responsible for all of our service lines, and most recently, we transacted a merger with a tech platform business, so very interesting for us, but responsible for ensuring that all of our customers have the best possible route to get work done, as Bruce alluded to earlier.
You guys are amazing, aren't you?
You can say that with slightly less surprise in your voice, Sam, if you want. That's fine too.
My name's Sam Smith, but not that one. I've realised singing isn't really for me, and inflatable latex suits really just for Friday nights. I'm the president of Pontoon, which means one day these guys might work with me in a different way. I spend a lot of my time working with customers globally on large-scale workforce solutions, and hear them pontificate and not really understand much about freelancers other than the plumber inhale, to your point, Christine, around expense, and consistently working to try and find solutions for them that are compliant and perhaps less sexy than they would like them to be. So pleased to be here.
Great. Thanks for being here, guys. So just to mess you about, I'm just going to jump to question 3 to start with. So Sam, I'll come to you. How have perceptions of independent talent shifted across the organizations that you support?
Well, I'd say not a lot, if I'm being honest, which is probably more helpful. People pontificate about it. They think they know what they're talking about in general, but I would say very few large organisations have got it right. I can think of a couple that, badge their capabilities as total talent management, where they really have plugged in and enabled themselves to engage with proper freelance communities. I think others have not advanced themselves, don't particularly and fully understand the communities available to them, and they're somewhat restricted to particular categories or industry sectors. So I think it's going to accelerate quicker than I've seen it across large corporates. I think there's now more of an acceptance that we need to enable people to go to work in the way in which they would like to, rather than try and squeeze people into particular buckets of, classified or misclassified headcount. And I think the general view is we need to tackle this. It's a technology-enabled tackling process. Again, to Christine's point, how do we get these people paid compliantly without it being an emotional challenge, without it being something that causes mental health issues, or people walking away from payment, or people not engaging with those organisations because they don't trust they're going to get paid correctly. And that equity component, I think, is a constant push of why people aren't engaging in the right way. The equitable consideration of somebody sitting next to, near, on or offshore, doing the same job in a very different compensation band as it's considered. So there's a lot more work to be done, and I think the complexity of people believing they understand what they're talking about. I just came from the SIA CWS forum. I see some folks here today, and everyone's talking about AI, but sit in the pub and say, what do you mean by AI? I think we still have that same problem with freelancer engagement. People talk about it all day long, but actually when you get down to the bones of it, do those people that are speaking to it really understand how to engage that talent in their business? And I would argue not well enough today.
So still in the education phase. David or Simon, anything to add onto that?
So I would say that where there's a shift is that in the world that we operate in, contractors, temps, and a little bit of statement of work operators are traditionally kind of in scope with kind of a process, and the increasing amount of people who are under independent contractor freelancer had kind of just been dealt with differently. Like everyone's got a different solution, whereas the solutions around the kind of the first bit that I mentioned has been standard-ish with a few nuances, whereas around freelancers, independent contractors, Wild West, and people see that that's got to change. Right? That's definitely changing, but that solution is not nailed. Right? So this is why this Work Summit today is so timely, because it is a red hot topic. The big companies, the Fortune thousands that we're supposed to be talking about, they want to solve it, and there is not a kind of standard way of resolving. So I definitely see that shift, and I also see the shift being slightly different based on geography. So like in North America, where a lot of corporate headquarters are based, it's more of a kind of, well, they're out of scope, but it's not necessarily that hard, is it? Whereas you come to Europe, Asia, whatever, it's a completely different challenge in terms of compliance and governance, and are people allowed to do that, and tax and all that kind of stuff, and it's a much, much bigger challenge, often for relatively small amounts of spend. So, but it's rocketing up the agenda from my perspective.
Are you seeing the same?
Yeah, I'm seeing the same. I think I'd just take a slightly different lens. I think for many years now that we've suffered, our customers have suffered a competitive advantage by not having access to these freelancers that we need. And I think they realise now, and I'll give you a segue into another question, that if they want to win in business, they have to have access to this talent. And previously, the control was with procurement or finance, and it's just not a conversation on the table because it's so far down the line and we don't really know what we're talking about. But now things move so quickly. To be competitive, they must deal with this problem. And that's why it's coming to the forefront, as you said, Simon and Sam.
A necessity. So I'll do a quick hand show. I was going to do a hum, but that would just be me copying. So let's do a hand show. So if you had to be in one of these two buckets, you're in HR or you're in procurement, let's do a hand show. If you're I'm trying to force you into one of those buckets. So who's in HR? Thank you. And procurement? Okay. About 2/3 HR.
Procurement was like this, and HR was like this.
Did you?
But it's interesting, if we'd done that 5 years ago, I think the majority of the non-employee workforce was managed by procurement, but there are more now, SIA figures, thank you, Dawn, there are more programs now being operated under HR than there were our procurement. So it's definitely shifting that way, and I think somebody had to step up and own all of this, and I think it is HR that are doing that. That seems to be the trend, at least. But the question I have, to come to you first, David, in the organizations you work with, who are you seeing typically owns the strategy for workforce planning, both for the traditional and non-employees? But concentrate on that, who owns the strategy as opposed to operation?
Let's have some truth telling. So I haven't got any customers at the moment that have any workforce plans that they want to stand behind and give me, right? If I say to them, what's it going to look like in 12 months, they can't tell me, whether that's procurement or HR or leadership. And that's fine because we're in a changing world and the world is changing week on week. I would also tell you, from a lens of a solution provider panel here, we sit down in front of HR people and they say, it's not my problem, it's not my job spec. Or we sit down in procurement and they say, it's not my problem, it's not my job spec. And for too long, the freelancers have fallen between the gap. Now we talk to our customers, because we are thought leaders, about total talent management, how we get work done, the routes to get the work done, tasks and skills, etc. And all of a sudden, when you can go a level up and someone says, actually, I get it. We don't need to talk about who does what. Let's think about it holistically. We can then start having some meaningful conversations. And then we're also, again, helping you out here, Bruce, we then think about how we can look at technology to help us either make that decision of where that work's going to get done, and there's some tools that can do that. But then we also start thinking about, does it have to be the traditional model? And again, my colleagues, my peers here will have this. Solutions were traditionally, I'm doing contractors, I'm doing an MSP, not doing perm, and then someone else will do an RPO, I'm not doing contractors. Now we're being challenged that if we can't deliver all types of these solutions for our customers that they are demanding, then we need to up our game. And then when we can do that, when we come to the table, we can say, whichever way that you want your work done, we can help you make that decision and we can put it in the right box. That's what we're seeing. And that decision is going above our general HRD or our head of procurement. We're talking to the exec and the FDs now about how we're going to manage this. Again, because we've got to win at business, you have to have that competitive advantage. So some of the big organizations that we deal with, they really struggle with that. It's really difficult for them to change the direction of the ship. When we've got small to medium size and some startups, some really entrepreneurial businesses, we can make those changes really easy because we're dealing with the exec and they're winning at business. And I think that's a really interesting place.
Thank you. Yeah, the greenfield makes it much easier, right? Sam, any thoughts on that?
It just makes me feel stupid. I do, and I think for me, I said I had a conversation around this very thing just yesterday, and I have a view that with the freelancer community, if they know that I exist, then we failed. I think this is a technology-enabled component that plugs into a wider conversation around a single entry point into an organisation. Customers want to control their spend. If you can deliver them confidence that their spend is visible in one place, under one framework of conditioned reporting, then they feel a sense of comfort that you've got your arms and control around it. But I think if they feel a second, third, or fourth party engaged. The business is going to feel you're interrupting their ability to get work done. This isn't about assigning a worker. This is about delivering work. And I think we need to ensure as an industry that we're enabling that access to a really important, rich talent pool of capability that I think is going to broaden and broaden and broaden. Now, it's been restricted to some pretty narrow areas in business that have been early adopters of the freelance community because it's been built out of those particular industry sectors. But I think it's going to broaden, and I think we have to enable it, and I think we almost have to be kind of ninjas behind the scenes, not seen, but enabling and controlling the process from a tech enablement perspective rather than people disrupting the engagement of the freelancer community. That's my uneducated view.
Right. Simon, just dig a bit deeper on that. What are you seeing in terms of, are there any changing personas getting involved in this now?
Yeah, so it's interesting listening to the whole conversation because what we've talked about, and Christine was referencing this as well, we're talking about where process meets creativity, right? And there's a clash, right? And I think that the really big companies out there, only a relatively small number of them were in creative industries and therefore historically had large number of freelancers. But post-COVID, it's a much bigger number because people can work anywhere and therefore the ability to get that talent. So that's the shift that we're seeing. The transition that I would say is, here's a couple of points here. Your original question was kind of that, like you referenced HR versus procurement, Bruce. So going back 10 years, maybe 5 years and beyond that, a lot of the major organizations tried to put non-permanent workforces under procurement. And the reason for that was a couple of fold. It's like, A, it's a spend, it's a big spend, they'll manage it for us. And B, we don't really want this population in HR, owned by HR, because we want to be able to have a clear dividing line, co-employment issues, that kind of thing. I think those issues are going, I think that was a mistake because it was I think a lot of organizations are beginning to realize that. I've already had one conversation with Roy this morning about how companies are moving towards a more holistic approach, and we're seeing that everywhere. So I think that's a change, and that manifests itself in this conversation with a shift back to HR/talent owning it. But the real power in the big companies doesn't sit with either HR or procurement. It sits with finance, it sits with IT to a certain extent, and in some cases it sits with the business. I mean, I'm not going to generalize and say all businesses are the same. I certainly work with some organizations where people in HR, they're just like, look, the business makes the decision. So I think that varies a little bit, but I do see finance playing an increasingly important role, and they can say yay or nay. But I do want to highlight one thing on the kind of personas getting involved, which is the role of external consultants, because I think this is changing. I was talking to I won't name the company because it's unfair on them, big global name in a regulated industry. I was speaking to them recently about their approach to getting work done. And they know that they're making a mistake. They know that the path they're going down, this was the global head of talent, they're being advised by one of the big four, and she doesn't agree with the advice. But to cut a long story short, they're going down that path because they see being advised by a consultancy with a big name as an insurance blanket, and they literally said to me, but if it is wrong and the regulators come after us, at least we can say we were advised to do it. And I think we need to be honest about the fact that there are also advisors out there who are broad rather than deep experts, and sometimes that they can play a really important role. And I think historically they've played an increasingly important role, but now the big players, the generalists, I think are beginning to struggle a bit. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the course of the next months and years.
Because I know you're talking about, how did it work out for them?
It is unresolved at this stage. Yeah, but it's an ongoing conversation. But there's an internal battle. There's a fantastic book out there, and I've forgotten the name of it. It will come to me in a moment. About it's called The Big Con. That's what it's called, and it's really about governments, but it's about how governments have become shorn of decision-making capability because they just rely on advisors. And it sounds like I'm really bad. I worked in the Big Four for a period of time, so I'm just saying it's interesting that their influence has increased and now seems to be on the decrease from my personal perspective.
And Sam, in your experience, are there certain industries that are leading the way or more open to this concept of, work distribution design and thinking about work that way?
Yeah, natural synergy with creative and digital. If you look at production, film, they are. I said early adopters. I feel like that's an unfair label, but it's definitely more prolific in those industry sectors. But then what I'm seeing is rather than speaking to the vertical as an industry, you flip it to a horizontal, and actually you're seeing more and more of those requirements across big corporates. The digital roles that we're seeing across large businesses are multiplying at scale, at speed. The digital strategies for companies are significant. So rather than me seeing that from an industry sector, I'm seeing that in bubbles of business users across large corporates, whether they're big pharma, med devices, whether they're FMCG or retail. We're seeing much, much more of a demand to solve for the challenge and engage freelancers to deliver work, packages of work. The difference between the services procurement side versus engaging freelancers, I think, is becoming more and more blurred, which is why we need to accelerate to a much better standard solution. But yeah, I'd move away from it now being an industry sector conversation and flip it to the horizontal and say we're seeing it much, much more as an ask for particular business units or functions within large corporates.
Thank you. And I use this phrase quite a lot, that the technology is out there to do all of this. We have the data to do all of this better than ever. The humans have to catch up. So, Dave, what are your thoughts on that?
So tech and data. So for me, what I see, you mentioned AI. Yeah, everyone loves it. We all have played with it. Made my father-in-law look a bit silly with a cartoon and showed him how it works. But the big problem when we have it ourselves is first thing we do is we say, can we do a proof of concept, or can we see if it works? We'll try legal first. That's what everyone does. And we're really frightened because GDPR, data protection stuff. I was at Google on Tuesday and they had some research done. They sponsored it internally, obviously, but they reckon that if you've got the best people in the organization and the very best AI, and they actually were quite complimentary. They said pretty much all the AI is up there. Unless you've got people that are open to change and changing the way that they work, you're just going to get the same result. And I think for our industry, it's the same. So we talk internally, we've just become part of a tech business that if you want to buy a car for £90,000, you can buy it online. You want a mortgage for £200,000, 15 minutes, you can get it. If you want to hire someone, can you send me their Word document, please? Can you send me their CV? And can we interview them in 3 weeks' time on a Tuesday? I can't do that now. We're well behind in terms of acquisition of talent. So for me, I think that the tech is going to change that. And as for data, we, as an industry, we have rich data. We have personal data. We have banking details for the freelancers to get you paid. We integrated banking systems. We've got people's work history. We have rich data. We don't do enough with it. We don't do anything like we should with it commercially we should use it and make some money, ethically and sensibly, obviously. But we don't do anything with it. And I think there's an opportunity that if we did something constructive with it, it would be for the benefit of the industry as well. But I think what's holding us back is that we're just afraid. And the summary from the Google speaker was that mass participation versus proof of concept, if you just let people have it, they are virtuoso and they will try and make their life easier. Yeah, they will try and make it work so they can finish work earlier. And I think that's a big step forward, how we can embrace it. So, and it's not exclusive to our industry, but our clients. And you mentioned regulated industries. Honestly, if we talk to any of our regulated business about AI, I mean, we've got new contracts coming out, you probably have, all about AI and how we're going to treat the data, and are we using AI with their data? It's a real blocker, I think, to agility and development of how we're going to work in the future. But for sure, it's coming, and we're part of the Head First group now. They're all about AI, and it's fantastic to see that. It's a different way of working. So I go back to the point, it's not about the technology per se, it's a different workflow, a different process, a different way of thinking. So I think it's going to be exciting, but we're not there yet for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting that we, back in the day, I had to go to work to learn how to work, if that makes sense, when I was in my early 20s, because I hadn't been taught that at school. You know, I didn't come out with any work skills, not like Microsoft, Excel, or anything like that. And we used to actually, I'd take stuff from the office, you know, pinch the odd paper clip, and when Post-it notes came out, I was very excited, right? Take some of those bad boys home. But now we've got our workers, we want them to bring stuff with them, right? Using ChatGPT. We won't say it officially, but we're very happy if they increase productivity because they're doing that on the side, right? Simon, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think that the our whole industry is so ripe for change, and you know, the way that the world of like recruitment works in terms of all these concepts that we're talking about is so backwards. Like it's so. Like you mentioned CVs. Just one very quick analogy, because I know we're running a little bit short on time, but if you hopefully most of you are familiar with LinkedIn. Okay, so LinkedIn obviously is a professional social media environment, and this is it reflects the way the world of recruitment and corporate hiring operates. You list your job, you list, you know, how long you were there for, what you did while you were in that job, what your reason for leaving was, and then kind of why you moved on. If you compare that to dating social media, right? If you go to a dating website, you don't see a list of your previous relationships, what you did in those relationships, when did you leave, what was your reason for leaving,
reviews,
that kind of thing. I'm not even going to get into what was your last position, but the point being that we're so it's lighthearted, but it's a serious point, which is it's a distinction between looking back in the past versus looking forward to what you've got to offer, okay? And what does success look like? And so I think we've got so much to learn, and there's a lot happening now, there's a lot of change, but change is hard, and organizations are not changing. They're changing at the speed of oil tankers, not the speed of light.
Thank you. Great analogy, great analogy. So let's get practical here. We all know the world is changing. We're all seeing this growth, and it's our responsibility to advise our clients to get on board, get started somewhere. So for the audience, what advice would you give if somebody sat there thinking, I get all this, but how can I change the conversation next Monday to get somebody inside the organization to start thinking differently in this way about the value of this independent contractors? Who wants to start? Sam?
Well, I would say, look within your own business. You're doing it already. You just don't know it. And find those use cases within their own business, and speak to them. I think to David's point, we have this fear-led resistance to change, and particularly technology and the unknown. But the truth is, there are very few new ideas. There are very few new things that we come across, and anything new will be stolen by Elon Musk anyway, and he'll oust the founders and pretend it was his own idea at some point. But my point is there is very little that's new. It exists in your business today. Let's go and seek it out, and it's easy to find. An AP report is going to help you find where this population of workers exists today. And if you make a choice, as many organizations are, to say, I want a single entry point for all non-permanent workers that engage with my business for compliance reasons, for visibility reasons, let's go and find those people that exist in those organizations today. Put the right classification around them. Don't then create obstacles to make it harder to engage that population, and show that it's already happening. And it's already happening in a compliant or semi-compliant way, but we're just going to put some wrappers around it to tighten it up and make it more visible for the company. So I think for me, it's about saying you're doing it already, even if you don't realize you're doing it. It's going to show you where you're doing it, prove that it works, and then scale it for you so you have access to greater outcomes and a broader talent pool available to you to help you get your work done.
Great. Sage advice. Thank you. David?
For me, it's agility, and I know everyone was going to say that, but it's just really recognizing what your business looks like today. It's going to be unrecognizable in 2 years' time if you allow that to happen. I think the customers that I'm seeing in a very tough market at the moment for the economy, the customers that continue to grow are the customers that are thinking about tomorrow and changing, and they're willing to be brave, to your point, being brave and saying, that's okay, we're going to be different tomorrow than we are today, and we're going to need different people, so that's okay as well. So today we've got some brilliant people, seek them out, they're there if you need them, but tomorrow we might need some different people. And again, customers that are showing me real success and growth are those that are embracing that. And then finally, I have to put this point in, I found my 2 daughters some summer work when they come back from university. They said, Dad, you're in recruitment, you can find me a job. And we found them with one of our clients, and they logged onto our portal, and they gave me some feedback. And and they said, Dad, this is rubbish. But because it was designed for a certain type of worker that predominantly are the type of worker that we manage, and it's not designed for that type of worker. A 22-year-old that's completely tech-enabled, thinks that everything should be done in a certain way, and I'm listening. So that was my final point. What could business leaders do is listen. We've got the people in our own businesses, fantastic people. If you give them ChatGPT or Gemini, they will use it. Listen to them. Listen to what they can achieve, and if you embrace it, the business will move forward. I think those that won't listen and have a 3-year plan and hell or high water, we're going to stick to it, I think you're going to lose the race.
Great. Thank you. Simon?
Yeah, so I think that you've got to find the right person in an organisation. Some companies and some individuals in companies recognise the issue much more than others, and that person isn't always going to sit in the same job. So you need to find someone that really is championing finding the solution, and then you've got to make it easy for them. You know, we've been reflecting that, like big companies, people on executive boards, they see these, they just want something wrapped with a bow on it and go, okay, that's that, you've solved my problem, it's easy. They like process, they like simplicity. All these self-service systems are designed not for the end user, but for the people that want the data and the process to be simple. So that irresistible force and immovable object have got to meet. And it's kind of on people that do our jobs to kind of come up with that solution, and that's I think why we're here today, and talking to the likes of Worksome to be able to understand how do we make it simple so that we can take a simple solution to a major organisation and say this is how we're going to solve that problem for you, and underneath that there's a whole magnitude of issues, and then you've just got to find the right people. I think they're likely to be in the talent space that are going to take it and champion it, but I think that now is definitely the time for that to be happening because it is moving at lightning pace. And by the way, David, my son told me at the weekend, he's only a first year at university, but he's told me that he can definitely do my job. All right? He made that very clear at the weekend. So we're carrying on that conversation on Friday.
Great, thank you. So that wraps us up. Please, any questions, come and find us during the day. Thank you so much. Round of applause for the panel.